Alan Petersen knows so much about Gunnar Widforss. He is the curator of fine arts for the Museum of Northern Arizona. He worked in the south rim of the Grand Canyon before moving to Flagstaff in 1980, adding a lot of years to his life, to attend Northern Arizona University. He has curated exhibitions by such notable artists as Gunnar Widforss, of course, Mary Russell Farrell Colton, Merrill Mahaffey, Bruce Aiken, Ed Mell, and Kurt Walters. In 2020, Alan published the Gunnar Widforss catalog, Raisonné, oh good, and continues his work on a monograph on Widforss' life and art. Alan.
One quick thing, he is a grant recipient that we were talking about by the auction. I got to put the plug in, but he got it this May. So this gives you an example of a person that it actually went to.
Well, good morning. It's so great to be here with y'all. So many people with like minds and passion about the canyon. Thank you for the introduction. What is a catalog raisonné? As complete a collection, a catalog of works as one can put together, yeah. And before I go further, so as many of you know, my mission is to basically put Gunnar back on the map of American art history. And so thank you to whoever made the decision to include his masterpiece, Plateau Point, on the cover of the program. So over the last 130 years, the Grand Canyon has become the subject for countless works of art, as evidenced by the current exhibition down in Kolb Studio and the annual Celebration of Art program. And most of those works have been done from the rims. A small number of adventurous artists have worked within the canyon, but until recently, this was uncommon. Can you hear me okay? It's good space, okay. Prior to 1973, no painter had produced as many inner canyon works as Swedish-American painter Gunnar Widforss. In the 1920s and 30s, Widforss actively pursued inner canyon subjects, often making vigorous hikes to do so, and the quality of his work has set the standard for contemporary artists who view him as their mentor. The earliest paintings or drawings made at the canyon were produced by artists for government surveys, the best known being John Wesley Powell's survey, whose final report, The Tertiary History of the Grand Canyon District, authored by Clarence Dutton, was richly illustrated by William Henry Holmes and Thomas Moran. In the early 20th century, the Santa Fe Railroad spurred interest in Grand Canyon as a subject with its masterful marketing plan that relied on well-known artists visiting the area and producing paintings for the railroad that were then used for a variety of promotional materials. Santa Fe advertising director Charles Higgins initiated the practice in 1892 when he invited Thomas Moran back to the canyon. Moran hadn't ventured below the rim before until his 1892 visit, when he, Higgins, and photographer William Henry Jackson visited John Hance and made an adventurous trip down Hance's trail. Okay. So another early artist who painted inner canyon subjects was Louis Aiken. Between 1904 and his death in 1913, Aiken produced a number of inner canyon paintings, notably the Temple and Morning Grand Canyon. Hermit Canyon, sorry. And in 1907, very similar subject as you can see, William Robinson Lee spent a month camped below Yuma Point working plein air. In 1911, he related his experiences in a colorfully written article for Out West magazine. And he did return to work in the Inner Canyon on at least one other occasion. Has anybody read that article in Out West? Oh, no. Oh, it's fantastic. You'll have to check it out. It's fabulous. Other notable artists who worked in the Inner Canyon between 1892 and 1973 include Carl Oscar Borg, Howard Cook, Edward Potthast, and Louis Henry Sharp. Although, aside from Aiken and Lee, no artists of their generation painted in the Inner Canyon regularly. A new era of artists working in the Inner Canyon began when painter Bruce Aiken moved to Roaring Springs in 1973 to manage the pump house there. Aiken would become the most prolific painter of the Inner Canyon since Gunnar Widforss, producing hundreds of works over the 33 years he lived at Roaring Springs. As the number of river trips greatly increased in Grand Canyon in the 1980s, the number of artists visiting the Inner Canyon along the river corridor increased commensurately. Interest in painting the Inner Canyon developed rapidly after Merrill Mahaffey made his first river trip in Grand Canyon in 1981 with Hatch. The following year, he led an artist's river trip, dubbed the Recession Artists Raft Trip, raft, artists have to be cool, that included 29 artists. But aside from Gunnar Widforss, for most of the artists working in the Inner Canyon between 1892 and 1982, their experience was a single visit, perhaps with an extended stay. Widforss arrived in the United States in 1921 after spending the war years, the First World War, painting in Northern Europe. His usual routine was painting down in southern France and in the Tyrolean Alps. That's where he spent most of his career before coming to the U.S. Following the war, the conclusion of the war, he made a transformative trip to Tunisia in 1919 and 1920. After painting in Yosemite National Park and other Northern California locations for 2 years, Widforss made his first trip to Grand Canyon in 1923. And here's just one photo of Gunnar at work in Yosemite Valley. And I was talking with, I think, Ted or maybe somebody else about Gunnar's easel. And the great thing about Gunnar is if you look at enough photos of him at work, this easel is with him throughout his entire career. So it's kind of like his constant companion. And notice too, notice how lightly he travels. That is important to this story. Widforss was motivated to visit the Southwest by Stephen Mather, who had commissioned him to do some paintings of Zion National Park, also newly made a national park in 1919. In July, Widforss traveled, who commissioned him to do some paintings of Zion. So he spent the month of June working in Zion, and in July, Widforss traveled to the North Rim to, in his words, take a break from painting Zion. And so his idea of taking a break was to come paint the Grand Canyon. And one of the most miraculous things that I found in his personal scrapbook is a labeled photograph that he identifies as his first painting of the Grand Canyon. And just really quickly, what's notable about this is for any artist visiting a new subject, it takes a little bit of time to become accustomed to the subject and to learn its nuances. Gunnar went immediately for the whole enchilada, the big panorama from Bright Angel Point. This painting currently resides in Flagstaff. Let's see. Whoop. In August, he returned to Zion and then back to Yosemite. But in April 1924, Widforss returned to the South Rim to paint before heading north to Zion once again, and then Yellowstone in July, his only visit to Yellowstone. He returned to the North Rim in August and painted this masterpiece. So a year after his first visit to the Grand Canyon. This is currently in the collection of the National Museum in Sweden. That winter, 24-25, he presented the largest exhibition of his career in Washington, D.C., with 72 paintings, including many of Grand Canyon, at the National Gallery of Art. And here's a photo with some canyon paintings. At that time, the director of the National Gallery was none other than William Henry Holmes. At the opening reception, Holmes praised Widforss, saying, "These paintings are the finest things of the kind that have come out of the West. They're remarkable as to their geological construction and color. Indeed, as a group, they give a more satisfactory understanding of the Grand Canyon than any that have hitherto been attempted. It is well nigh impossible to convey the immensity and grandeur of these marvels of nature, but Mr. Widforss has accomplished. High praise indeed coming from William Henry Holmes, one of the greatest artists to work here. Following the exhibition, in January, Widforss returned to Grand Canyon, and by early February, he was in its depths working at Phantom Ranch. So I just included a rim shot because he's awesome. But on to Phantom. So thank you, Linda, for your work, and thank you for the photos of Phantom, and here's Gunnar's painting, a painting from this similar vintage. The ranch would become a regular winter destination for Widforss in the coming years, perhaps due in part to the availability of moonshine whiskey made by ranch manager Tom Moore, which Gunnar enjoyed greatly. He wrote to his close friend Carl Hagert, "This Grand Canyon is something unique to paint, deep, wide, and long, all the possibilities for atmospheric effects. One needs to be careful with drawing. Amen. Long and difficult, but frustrating. Long and difficult to learn, but fascinating." Oh. Whew, yeah, okay. Haven't done this in a while. No painter has been recognized as a good Grand Canyon painter since Moran, now about 90 years old. In fact, Moran might be. Anyway, I think I may be next, but there are some that think I do better justice to the whole thing, but I will never be the skilled painter that Moran is. He is a wizard. During the month that Widforss spent at Phantom Ranch in 1925, he produced two paintings for the Santa Fe Railroad, Phantom Ranch, seen here, which is a remarkable record of the site made only a couple of years after the initial phase of construction. You can see the buildings, but what I love about this photo, what's amazing about this depiction of Phantom Ranch? The trees. Yeah, notice how small the cottonwood trees are. So wonderful historical document of the ranch and the trees that eventually would make it, the verdant oasis that the ranch is. This painting would go on to hang in the office of Charles Higgins' successor William Simpson, who of course was the fellow who shepherded the Santa Fe Art Project for the next couple of decades. In 1925, Widforss also did a painting of what was then known as Altar Falls, today known as Ribbon Falls, roughly 5 miles up the trail from Bright Angel Creek. He would have made that walk every day for perhaps 10 days to complete the painting. Despite his love of cigarettes and whiskey, he was a vigorous hiker. And in a couple of letters to his mother and his friend Carl Hagert, he remarked that it took him 3.5 hours to walk from Phantom Ranch to the South Rim. Not bad, eh? Emery Kolb, who was a close friend of Widforss's, recalled that on more than one occasion, he saw Widforss walk down the Kaibab Trail, cross the Tonto through Pipe Creek, and ascend the Bright Angel Trail, another quote, for a lunch break. You ever done that for a lunch break? You want to do that at lunch today? So Gunnar's, weirdly incredible physical ability is what made many of these paintings possible. And here's another painting from 1925. So you recognize, I think, probably this is maybe a quarter of a mile up from the river, heading towards the ranch. And isn't the color and the texture just beautiful? And I love how the texture, his texture in the painting is so perfect for the metamorphic rock. It's just, it's poetic, I think. So his earliest works in the Inner Canyon from 1925 confirm his interest in such subjects. A few years later, in 1929, he made an excursion down the Hermit Trail to paint. One of the works that he returned with is Breezy Point, depicting the towering promontory that rises above Hermit Camp at the terminus of the Hermit Trail. And of course, at this point, the camp is gone because Phantom Ranch had taken over as the Inner Canyon destination. In 1917, one of Widforss's fellow countrymen, Carl Oscar Borg, visited Hermit Camp and depicted the same scene with the camp buildings, tents still in place. And Borg is a much looser painter than Gunnar was. And then just here's a little comparison. And if you like collecting postcards, which I'm sure many of you do, there are postcards available of this view. Several different versions. Returning to the Inner Canyon in the fall of 1930, Widforss undertook a number of paintings, including a view of Pipe Creek. Each morning, he walked 7 miles from the rim to the location, returning when he was finished for the day. It's a powerful painting looking up Pipe Creek that accentuates the architectural nature of the view and the tower-like formations in the Kaibab along the rim. He wrote to his mother, "I have painted a picture of Pipe Creek. It took 2 hours to go down, 3 to go up. Good exercise. Left the painting stuff down there wrapped in a waterproof canvas. Have rarely had so much fun painting. I'm seeing new things in the scene and experiencing Grand Canyon stronger and more seriously." And here's a photo. Oh, there we go. And here's a photo of Gunnar with the paint too. Ooh, okay. With the painting standing along the rim. He's always got a cigarette. So one of Gunnar's great masterpieces, among many, I think, is this view from Plateau Point. As with Pipe Creek, he walked to the site in the morning, 6.5 miles, worked on it for a couple of hours, and then wrapped in waterproof canvas, leaving it under an overhanging rock until the next day. So because Gunnar worked outdoors, he could only work on a scene like this for maybe 2 hours at the most before the light changed significantly to where he would have to lay off for the rest of the day. In fact, he may well have started at Plateau Point, painted in morning light, walked how far is it, 3.5 miles over to Pipe Creek and worked on Pipe Creek, painted in early afternoon light, before then heading back to the rim for a round trip walk of 17 miles. Emery Kolb walked to Plateau Point with Widforss each day for the 2 weeks he worked on the painting. This is recounted in the Belknap book. When Widforss completed the painting, Kolb, who you may know as an amateur painter, told him it was a fine painting, but he thought the composition could use a little improvement. So Kolb went and dug up, or he didn't dig up, but he found a dead agave and stuck it among some rocks there, took a photograph from the same location, same spot that Gunnar was working from, made this print and hand-colored it. And later in the 50s or 60s, he made an original oil painting from the same photograph. And then again, here's a comparison. And Gunnar was a master of composition. And bless his heart, but Emery's device is just kind of a stereotypical distraction, I think. That's not very sharp. Can you guys see the little circles? Here's a map of Gunnar's Inner Canyon locations to this point that I can identify to this point. Here's Hermit Camp down here. As you can see, many painted right around Phantom and the Black Bridge. And then Altar Falls up here. Another of his most striking Inner Canyon paintings with a similar composition to Plateau Point is Grand Canyon Inner Gorge in the collection of the museum here at the South Rim. It was commissioned by explorer Lincoln Ellsworth and painted from a location along the Clear Creek Trail. And for river historians, you can see that the river's at a very low level. And, notice the size of the 2 gravel bars at the mouth of Bright Angel Creek. And it's just a tour de force in terms of color and geology. It includes Cheops Pyramid and Isis Temple up on the skyline. Eddie McKee pointed out to Gunnar at some point that you have a great understanding of geology in order to be able to pull off a painting like this. And Gunnar, who was extremely self-effacing, replied, "But I don't know anything about geology," which he may well not have, but he was a great observer. And it was his ability to objectively observe, coupled with his meticulous and pretty stupendous drawing ability, that made paintings like this possible. Okay, so I'm going to tell a story really quickly because I've only got 1 minute left, right? Okay. So one winter, he was down at Phantom Ranch, and he assisted in a rescue. So Ranger Satterwhite had been traveling along Bright Angel Creek. The creek began to rise in a flood, and Tom Moore, along with Gunnar, grabbed a rope and some tackle and left Phantom and went and saved Satterwhite, who was stranded on the wrong side of the creek. So I can't tell the rest of that story, sorry. And let's see, so between 1925 and 1934, Gunnar spent at least 130 days working below the rim. We currently only know of 14 paintings that he did, but based on my study and his what he expressed in terms of his rate of working, he probably produced between 40 and 50 paintings total below the inner rim, all of which went on to inspire and all the current artists working below the rim. Thank you very much.